Hello everyone, this is Pet Crochets. Welcome back to my channel. For Christmas, my husband wanted to take me out for drinks and a romantic outing. We always do Christmas together by ourselves, so we wanted to make this special. I ordered a lot of dresses online, but then I quickly realized that they weren't going to make it in time for the reservation date. So I decided to crochet my own romantic Christmas dress, and this is what I came up with. My husband did help. He suggested the bow idea as well as the open back. So we kind of collabed on this dress, which makes it even more special to me. This is also the second dress I've ever crocheted. I've only ever crocheted 2 dresses. One of them is the Antonella lace dress, and this is the second dress I've ever crocheted. I'm fairly new to crochet, so I'm still learning as I go, and I plan on making many more dresses very soon. As always, I appreciate everyone's constructive feedback as I am still learning, and I also appreciate all of those who are supporting me along in this journey, so thank you very much, and I hope you had a wonderful holiday season. As always, this dress is going to be measurement based and completely customizable and adjustable. I also have a clip at the end in case that you don't want to do this front keyhole section here, or if you want to change up the back of the dress and add a corset detail with the straps to make it more secure. I want my viewers to create something that they're going to feel confident, secure, and comfortable in. So I'll always encourage all of you to adjust where necessary in order to make this fit your body and your style. In the clips, I'm wearing a nude legging under this dress. However, you can wear red tights, you can wear a slip, you can sew a liner onto the dress. Again, this is all up to preference and what works for you. If you like my videos and my tutorials, please like, comment, and subscribe. I have more tutorials on the way very soon and projects that I can't wait to share with you all. Let's get started with the tutorial. For this dress, since it's measurement based, you can use any size yarn and hook. I'm going to be using the Simply Soft Yarn in the color Autumn Red. It's a beautiful deep red color. We're going to be starting with our bust cups. For this, I'm going to be using a 3.5mm hook, and I'm going to start off by making foundation single crochet stitches. This is the chainless foundation stitches. I have a video tutorial up on how to do this type of chainless foundation stitch. You want to make enough stitches that it goes from the base of your breast up to your nipple. So from the bottom of your breast up to your nipple vertically. To do this type of stitch, you're going to put your hook into that crossed stitch in the back closest to the yarn. Pull up a loop. You're going to yarn over, go through the top loop, and then yarn over and do a single crochet by pulling your yarn through the 2 loops on your hook. This is the same bust cups I did in my Stevie Nicks top tutorial. I'll also have that linked. So this was around 2.5 inches for me. For reference, I'm a size 32A. Now we're going to chain 1 and turn our work, and we're going to start single crocheting, beginning with the second stitch from the hook. The first one is our turning chain. Now we're just going to single crochet into every single stitch all the way down. Essentially, we're just making a rectangle, so you're going to keep doing these single crochet rows. You're going to chain 1 at the end, turn your work, and then go back and single crochet. And you want this rectangle to be long enough that it goes from the side of your breast to your nipple. For reference, that was around 3.5 inches for me. If you want more coverage for the side of your breast, make sure that you're making it long enough that it starts from the side of your body and then ends up at your nipple, if that makes sense. This is my favorite way to make bust cups because you can make them any size and it's truly measurement based. Once you've completed, so I have my 3.5 inches, you're going to add 2 more single crochets into that last stitch. So in total, you'll have 3 single crochets into that very last stitch. Adding these stitches into the last stitch is going to give us that cup shape as we add more rows. Now you're going to turn your work to the side, and you're going to put your hook in and start making single crochets down this side. There's no clear stitch to go into, you just want to make sure that these single crochets are fairly evenly spaced out. So you're just going to go all the way down this edge and make a single crochet. So you're going to pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2 loops on your hook for a single crochet. When you get to the end, you want to make sure you add 1 final single crochet right here, right before that knot. Now we're going to chain up 1 and turn our work, and we're going to second stitch from the hook to do single crochets, And essentially we're going to be adding single crochets and working down this L shape. So you're going to go across, go all the way down the side. When you reach the end, you're going to chain 1 and start working back across that L shape. And you want to keep going until this cup is big enough to cover your entire breast and give you the coverage that you desire. When you finish that last row, you want to make sure you end on the side that's going to be going in towards your sternum or the midline of your body. From here, we're going to chain 1 and turn our work to this side here that has the rough edge. We're going to be single crocheting all the way down this edge to clean it up. So you're going to place your hook in and make sure that the stitches are fairly even. Once again, there's no clear stitch to put these single crochets in, so you just kind of want to go in randomly, but make sure that the single crochets are fairly evenly spaced out. And you're going to do this all the way down to the end. I've now reached the end, and I'm going to be placing 2 single crochets into this last stitch. Now we're going to turn our work once again. This is the border that's going to be on the side of your body. You are going to go into every stitch and single crochet down this edge. For the first half, you're going to see those stitches and go into those stitches that we left from the foundation single crochet. And then for the second half, once again, you're just going in randomly, but making sure your single crochet stitches are evenly spaced out. We've now reached the end. We're going to slip stitch into the very first single crochet stitch we did on the other side. Once we're done, we're going to do 1 extra chain, and then we're going to cut our yarn and pull it through to secure. Now we're going to repeat all of these steps for a second bust cup, so you should have 2 bust cups. Now we're going to be working from the bust cup towards the body of the dress. We're going to be creating that keyhole. So I'm grabbing a 3.75mm hook, and I'm finding that corner stitch on the edge of the bust cup. This is the side that's on the side of your body, not towards the midline of your body. You're going to find the stitch above that corner stitch and pull the slip knot through that stitch. Once again, this is the stitch above that corner stitch. We're going to turn our work. We're working on the bottom side of the bust cup now. Now we're going to find that corner stitch. We went above that corner stitch. We're now going into that corner stitch, and we're going to do a slip stitch. We're working on the bottom edge of the bust cup, so you want to make sure that you orient your bust cups correctly so that you're working on the correct side. We're working from the bottom of the bust cup down towards the rest of our body to create the body of the dress. Now we're going to chain up 2, and we're going to be placing a double crochet into every single stitch, including this very first stitch here that's holding that chain up of 2. So you're going to double crochet all the way down this row, and I'll show you where we're going to be placing that final double crochet at the end of this row, as it can be kind of hard to see. So once again, we're working from the side of our bust cup, and we're working in towards the midline or the pointed edge. So here's that corner, the pointed edge of our bust cup. We're placing that final double crochet into that corner stitch right there. That is the tip or the apex of the bust cup. This is the side that's going towards the midline of our body. So that last double crochet into that corner stitch. And this is what you should have so far. Now we're chaining up 2 and turning our work. And once again for this row, we're placing a double crochet into every single stitch, including the stitch that's holding this chain up of 2. I'm going into that first stitch because at the end of the row, I'm not going to be going into that chain up of 2. I'm just ending at that final stitch. So you're going to go all the way down. This might be hard to see again, but this is the final stitch. I'm not going into that chain 2 space. I'm just ending where that last stitch is. We are chaining 2 and turning our work, and now I'm going to begin doing increases. So to do an increase, you're going to place 2 stitches into the very first stitch. Here's my increase, and now we double crochet into every single stitch. I'm going to be doing increases on both ends. One end is going to be on the midline of our body to create that V keyhole shape, and the increases on the other side are so that it can wrap around and go around my back and later create that open back effect. So you want to place 2 stitches into that very first stitch, and then 2 stitches into that very last stitch. So we're increasing twice on this row. and it's slowly going to start increasing on both sides. Now we're going to chain 2 and turn our work, and for this row we're doing no increases, so 1 double crochet into every single stitch, and I'm not going into that turning chain at the end of the row, I'm just ending at that final stitch. If you want the keyhole opening to be a bit smaller, you can also increase into every row rather than every other row for that side. Now we're once again doing another increase row, so I just did a no increase row. I'm going to chain 2, turn my work, and into the very first stitch I'm placing 2 double crochets. Then I'm crocheting down and placing 2 double crochets into that very last stitch at the end of the row. You're going to keep doing these increase and no increase rows or whatever variation you choose to do until that keyhole opening is as big as you'd like. I would suggest working on both of those bust or front panels at the same time so you can kind of hold them up against your body and see how wide that opening is. If you didn't want to do a keyhole opening, I explained this at the end of the video, but you can make a chain, connect the 2 bust cups together, and then just start working on the body of the dress directly from there. At the end, when it is your desired length, you're going to do 1 extra chain, cut and pull the yarn through to secure. And you're going to repeat this for the other side. So I was working on both sides at the same time just so I could see what that V shape was starting to look like. Here are my 2 front panels. Now I'm going to orient them in the correct direction and line up the edges. You can see that V shape right here. We're now going to work on cleaning up those sides so it looks nice and neat, and then creating the chain that's going to run across the top and connect the 2 bust cups. I'm grabbing the smaller 3.5mm hook, and I'm going to find the corner stitch on one of the front bust panels. So I'm going to go into that last stitch we made, the last double crochet stitch, and pull a slip knot through that stitch. Now I'm going to start slip stitching up that side, the slanted side, which is the side of the V-shaped cutout. We're going to slip stitch until we reach the base of the bust cup. We're stopping at the base of the bust cup because this is where we're going to have that chain that's going to run along to the other side of the front panel. So you're just going to put your hook in and try to make these slip stitches as even as possible, and make sure that you're not making it so tight that it starts to make the top curl. I made it to the base of the bust cup, and now I'm going to make a chain that's going to run from this side of the front panel to the other side. For me, I did 6 chains, however you can do as many chains as you'd like. This will determine how wide that opening is. Here I'm just measuring it up against the other front panel to see if I need more or less chains. Now I'm ready to attach this chain to the other front panel, so I'm going to grab that front panel and I'm going to slip stitch it into the other stitch on the other side of the panel, so that first stitch at the base of that bra cup on the other side. Basically, you're mirroring this side of the front panel. I'm putting my hook in from the top, grabbing the yarn, and pulling it all the way through that loop on my hook. So that's going to join the chain to the other side of the front bust panel. This is what we have so far. And now we're going to work down the other side of the other panel to clean up this edge as well. So like we did with the other side, we're just going to be slip stitching all the way down until we reach the bottom or the base of this panel. I made it all the way to the end, and I'm going to do one final slip stitch into that double crochet stitch at the base of the top, just like we did with the other side. Now we're ready to join these 2 ends together, and this is going to create that V shape opening, and it'll also allow us to continue working on the rest of this dress. So you're going to find that first stitch at the base of the other panel and slip stitch through that stitch. So you're pulling the yarn all the way through, and that will connect the 2 panels together. Now we're going to do 1 additional chain, cut, and pull the yarn through to secure. Okay, so this is what we have so far. We have our 2 front bust panels joined in the middle. We have our little V keyhole cutout, and now we're ready to start working on the body of our dress. I'm grabbing that 3.75mm hook again, and I have the top upside down, so I'm working on that bottom edge. I'm starting with that left corner and I'm putting my hook into the stitch on the side of the panel, not on the bottom, but on the side. I'm going to pull the slip knot through this part of the top, so on the side. And then now I'm going to slip stitch into that very first double crochet stitch at the bottom of the top right there, the one in the corner. Now I'm going to turn everything around, and I'm going to do a chain up of 2 to prepare for a double crochet. From here, we're going to double crochet into every single stitch. So I'm going to double crochet into that stitch that we just slip stitched into, and then all of the following stitches across. And I'll show you what we're doing with that middle slip stitch that we did to join the top together. When we reach this portion, you're going to do a double crochet into that slip stitch, just as you did with the other stitches, and then continue double crocheting all the way across. You're going to double crochet all the way to the end. We made it to the end. I did not go into that chain up of 2. I finished at that last stitch. I'm turning my work, and now I'm going to start increasing at the side. So I'm placing 2 double crochets into that first stitch and 2 double crochets into that last stitch. And you're going to keep repeating these increase and no increase rows, kind of like how we did for the bottom of our bust panel. Now here's where we're going to start adjusting this pattern based on what you prefer. I kept going with these no increase and increase rows until the 2 ends touched at my lower back. However, you can do whatever variation that you feel works best for you. So you can increase 3 rows, do 1 no increase row, increase 2 rows, do 1 no increase rows, increase every single row if you'd like, so that the back cutout isn't so low cut. If you wanted to build up even quicker, you can even throw a few increases into the body of that row, not just at the ends. Now the bottom of my dress measures 14 inches folded. My lower waist measurement is 28 inches, so this fits perfectly at my lower waist region. To join the 2 ends together, you're going to find that double crochet stitch on the other side. I like to put my hook from the top and then do a slip stitch. So you're pulling the yarn all the way through. And now we've joined those 2 ends together. You're going to turn your work around and do a chain up of 2. Now I'm going to double crochet into every single stitch. So I'm going into that very first stitch, and I'm just going to do a couple of double crochets and pull my yarn out because we're going to mark off the ends to do our increases. So you want to make sure that this back seam is directly in the center and that it's aligned. And we're going to take 2 stitch markers or bobby pins and mark off the corners or the sides of this dress. This is where we're going to start increasing to accommodate for the increase in our hips. I'm going to put my hook back in and double crochet to the stitch marker. Once I've reached the stitch marker, I'm taking that stitch marker out and doing an increase by placing 2 double crochets into that stitch. Then I'm placing the stitch marker right back so I know where to increase during the next rounds. I'm going to double crochet to that next stitch marker, and I'll show you one more time how to increase. I made it to the other stitch marker, and once again to increase, we're placing 2 double crochets into that stitch. Now we're going to double crochet to the end of the row, and I'll show you how to join this round together. We've now made it to the end. I'm going to do one last double crochet into that slip stitch that we made to join those 2 ends together. To end the row, we're going to place our hook into that very first double crochet and join with a slip stitch. Now I'm going to chain up 2 and turn my work. And I'm going to start double crocheting again. I'm placing a double crochet into every single stitch, including the stitch that's holding the chain up of 2 like we've been doing. This row I'm not going to be doing an increase, so I'm going to take the stitch marker out, do 1 double crochet, and then put the stitch marker right back. And basically you're repeating these increase and no increase rows until you reach your hip width. For me that was about 35 inches, however if you find that you need to increase more rapidly, you can do a different variation. You can do 2 increases, 1 row no increase, or increase every row until you reach your hip width. I reached my hip width at around 4 inches, And as you can see, folded it's 17.5 inches or 35 inches. From here, I'm going to remove the stitch markers because I'm no longer going to be doing increases since I've already reached the width I desire. I'm going to keep adding regular double crochet rows until I reach about mid-thigh length. Once again, here is another area where you might want to alter the dress if you'd like. After I reach around mid-thigh length, I'm going to start decreasing because I want the dress to hug my silhouette and be a little bit more form-fitting. However, if you want the dress to be looser at the bottom and not tight around the legs, I would just keep adding double crochet rows all the way down. This is entirely up to preference. I wanted to do kind of a mermaid style dress shape where it starts to narrow a little bit at the bottom and flare out around the ankles. So to do that, I'm going to place my stitch markers back on the corners after having aligned the seam down the center. And I'm going to start decreasing. In order to decrease, we're just going to double crochet to the stitch markers. I've reached the first stitch marker. I'm going to remove the stitch marker and I'm going to yarn over, put my hook into that stitch and pull up a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook. I'm now going to go into the next stitch over and pull up a loop as well. We now have 4 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over, pull through 3 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 more loops on a hook. So essentially we're double crocheting 2 stitches together and making that 1 stitch. Now I'm placing my stitch marker back and I'm going to double crochet, and I'll show you one more time how to decrease into the other stitch marker. We reach that stitch marker, we're removing the stitch marker, yarning over and pulling up a loop through that stitch. We're going into the next stitch, pulling up a loop. We're yarning over, pulling over 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 more loops, and we've double crocheted 2 stitches together. And now I'm placing my stitch marker right back. Now you're just going to alternate between these decrease and no decrease rows. So here I'm just showing you how to do a no decrease row. I'm just doing a double crochet and putting the stitch marker right back since I'm not doing a decrease. Once again, if you don't want the dress to be too tight or too narrow, you would just keep doing regular double crochet rows without decreasing. You're going to keep doing these rows until it is your desired style. When you're decreasing, you also want to start counting up your stitches. We want to get to a multiple of 5. This is because when we start doing those shell rows at the bottom, we need it to be a multiple of 5. So I just counted up my stitches, and as I was doing my decreases, I was keeping count of how many stitches I have. Once I reached that multiple of 5 and I was happy with the width of the bottom of the dress, I just kept adding regular double crochet rows until I was around 6 inches above my ankles to begin the shell rows. We're now ready to start the shell rows. You're going to chain 2 and turn your work, and I'm switching out my hook for a bigger hook. This is a 4.5mm hook. So it's a little bit more breezy and the shell pattern is more defined. We're going to go into that 3rd stitch from that chain, so basically we're skipping a stitch, and we're going to place 2 double crochets into this stitch. Now you're going to chain 1 and place 2 more double crochets into that same stitch. This is going to create that shell or fan-like pattern. Now without chaining, we're going to yarn over. We're going to skip a stitch, and into those next 2 stitches we're going to do a double crochet. So here's my first double crochet, and then placing 1 more double crochet into the next stitch. Now we're going to skip a stitch and then do another shell stitch. So 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 more double crochets, all into the same stitch. And remember, we're not chaining in between the shell stitches or those double crochet stitches. You're going to repeat this pattern all the way down, so skip a stitch, do 2 double crochets in a row, skip a stitch, and then do this shell stitch until you reach the end. We've now reached the end. To finish the row, we're going to slip stitch into that very first double crochet stitch that we did, and that will join the ends together. All the following shell rows are going to be increase rows, so you're going to start with a chain up of 3 and turn your work. The first 2 stitches we have are those double crochet stitches, so you're going to place a double crochet on the top of those 2 double crochet stitches we did in the previous round. Now we're going to chain 1 and then do our shell stitch. So you're going to place that next shell stitch in the middle of the previous shell stitch where that chain up of 1 space is. So if you remember back, the first row, we didn't do a chain up of 1 in between those double crochets and the shell stitch. Now we're doing a chain up of 1, and this is how we're going to increase. I finished a shell stitch, I'm doing another chain up of 1, and then doing those 2 double crochet stitches. It's easier to see now that we have that base row, so you can do the 2 double crochets on top of those previous 2 double crochets. Chain 1, and then do another shell stitch in the center of the previous shell stitch of the previous row. Basically, you're going to repeat this pattern of chaining 1, doing a shell, chaining 1, and doing 2 double crochets. At the end, we're going to join this round together by slip stitching into the second chain. We did a chain up of 3. Into the second chain, we're going to do a slip stitch, and that will join the round together. To begin the next row, you're going to chain 3 and repeat the pattern, and you're going to keep doing this until it is your desired length. You can make this portion as short or as long as you'd like, or skip it altogether if you don't want the shell portion. So I kept going until it reached around my ankles. For me, that was around 12 rows. So this is what it looks like when it's all done. I have my 12 rows of the shell stitches, the first row being the only row with no increases. I really love this stitch. If you're interested in a skirt with this stitch, my Stevie Nicks skirt is a layered skirt using this shell stitch. I'll have it linked above. Now I'm going to grab a 3.5mm hook to do the big bow that we're adding to the back of the dress. You're now going to make a loose chain that is very long. Mine is going to be 50 inches in length. This was a bit over 200 chains, I believe, maybe even more. But anyway, just keep going until you have a long chain. Now you're going to go into the second chain from the hook and do a single crochet, and then single crochet into every single stitch all the way down this chain, but you're going to skip that very last stitch right there. So you're going to single crochet until you reach that very last stitch. Now I'm not going into the last stitch and I'm turning my work. I'm not chaining, I'm just turning. I've turned my work. I'm going to put my hook into the front loop of that first stitch. I haven't chained. I'm just going directly into that front loop and doing a single crochet. And now I'm going to do this into every single stitch. So you're doing a front loop only, single crochet all the way down. Once again, we're not going to do this into the very last stitch. We're skipping that very last stitch. So I'm going to stop in the stitch before the last stitch. I made it to that stitch before the last stitch. I'm skipping that stitch. Once again, without chaining, I'm turning my work. And now we're doing back loop. So I'm putting my hook into the back loop and doing a single crochet. In the previous row, we did front loop. Now I'm doing the back loop. And once again, I'm not going into that very last stitch. I'm going to stop in the stitch before the last stitch. You're going to keep doing this, so alternating between front loop only and back loop only rows, skipping that very last stitch and turning without chaining until you have around 2 inches. So this is what I have so far. Now we want to clean up the rough edges on the side of these bows, and we're going to be doing that with slip stitches. For this, I'm grabbing my 3.75mm hook, and I'm going to loosely slip stitch down this edge. You want to make sure you're not making it too tight, otherwise it's going to curl up. That's why I'm using a bigger hook for this. So you're going to slip stitch all the way down. I didn't want to have to remove my hook and yarn, so I'm just going to slip stitch across this long edge until I get to the other side. However, if you want to, you can just chain 1, cut, and then do the other side separately. So here I'm just slip stitching down this long edge. Again, I'm doing this loosely. I'm going to do this until I reach the other side so I can clean up that rough edge as well. Once you've completed, you do 1 extra chain, cut the yarn and pull it through. And now we're going to form our bow. You want to make sure that this ribbed side is facing up. We're going to fold it in half. and then fold it in half again, but make sure you leave about ½ inch of space before the end. I just like the ends of the bows to be a little bit longer than the bow itself. Now I'm grabbing this folded bit right here, and you can use 2 stitch markers to mark it off, but you're going to sew this edge. So as you can see here, I'm just taking a tapestry needle with some of that yarn, and I'm going to sew straight down this edge. Once that's completed, we're now going to open this portion that we've just sewed down, so you can kind of see the bow coming together. So those 2 longer pieces are going to be the bottom of the bow, and this top portion is going to be the body of our bow. So you want to align this so that seam is in the center, and you have 2 equal sides for the bow. And here I'm just using a stitch marker, so I'm marking the middle of that bow. Once again, grabbing that tapestry needle with some yarn, and I'm going to sew the center of this down. So you're going to sew directly down the center of this bow. So now we have these 2 sides of the bow. You're going to use the ends of the yarn if they were long enough, or you can cut yourself a new piece of yarn, and you're going to tie the center of this down. This is going to create that bow-like shape. Now we're going to create the center of the bow. This is to hide that tie that we did earlier, or you could leave it the way it was if you made it neat enough. You're going to make a chain that's long enough that's going to wrap around the center of that bow. So here I'm just making sure that the length is correct. Once I have the desired length, I'm doing 1 extra chain. This is my turning chain, and I'm going into the second chain from the hook, and I'm going to start single crocheting all the way down. When I reach the end, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and then do another row of single crochet. You can make as many rows of single crochet as you'd like, depending on how thick you want this middle section to be. Once you're done, you're going to chain 1, cut the yarn. And now you're going to wrap this rectangle around the center of the bow, and then once again use a tapestry needle to sew those 2 ends together. Once you weave in all those loose ends, you can sew the bow onto the dress. I sewed along the perimeter of the bow just so it's nice and secure. So this is what we have so far, starting from the bottom to the top. We have the shell row, the base of the dress, and then we have this scoop open back. We're now going to work on cleaning up this rough edge along the scoop or open part of the back. To do that, I'm going to grab my 4mm hook. My dress is now inside facing down, so the inside of the dress is facing down towards the table, and I'm pulling a slip knot through the base of the bust cup on the side. I'm doing a chain up of 1, and now I'm going to go down and do single crochets along this entire rough perimeter to give it a nice edge. So I'm going to go all the way down the side, following the opening of the back. So you're going all the way down, going to that midpoint right there, and then going all the way back up to the other side. Once you reach the other side, the base of the other bust cup, you're going to chain 1, cut, and pull the yarn. Now we're going to work on the arm straps. For this, I doubled up my yarn, and I'm going to grab my 3.75mm hook. Again, the inside of the top is facing down towards the table. I'm going to the very top of that bust cup, and I'm pulling the slip knot through the very tip or the apex of this bust cup in order to do the straps. Now I'm going to do a chain to my desired length. This is going to depend on the style of strap that you wanted. You can make it long enough on both sides and tie it around your neck. You can make it very long and crisscross in the back, kind of like a corset style. Or you can do what I did, which is to make a chain that is not too loose. So this was about 40 chains, and I made it long enough that it can wrap around my shoulder and back down under my armpit. I made sure it wasn't too loose and definitely on the tighter side because the yarn will stretch, and made it tight enough that it's going to sit securely on my shoulders. Once I had that chain, I slip stitched it into the side of the base of the bust cup so that hits around my armpit area. I find that this works for me because my bust is on the smaller side. However, this is all going to depend on how much support you need for your bust area and what you feel comfortable with. I also did my straps this way because I really wanted this dress to be completely open back. However, I did get some comments that the sides of the dress were gaping a little bit because it doesn't have that extra support. So if you want, you can also do another chain across the upper back portion to give it that more cinched and extra structure. You're going to repeat this for the other side as well, depending on what kind of strap you made. And then weave in all of the ends and your dress is done. I want to make an extra note here addressing kind of the loose fabric on the sides of the dress. You can kind of see it happening in some of the clips. So I've gotten some suggestions on what can be done. You can either do a thin chain across the top of the back or the lower back to kind of pull that fabric together like so. Or you can make a really long chain like I said earlier and do a crisscross corset type of back, and this will give you extra support on the bust as well. Now I mentioned this earlier too, but if you don't want to do that V keyhole type of situation, you can make a chain and connect the two bust cups together and then start working those double crochet rows directly underneath. Finally, I'm just going to once again address the bottom of the dress. As I said earlier, I wanted a more mermaid silhouette that's cinched at the bottom. However, if you don't like this kind of shape, you can just double crochet all the way down, making sure that the last row is a multiple 5 if you plan to do those shell rows as well. Okay guys, and we're finally done. Here is the final product. I absolutely adore this dress. I love the bow. I personally love the low back and the cutout. And the most important thing is that I felt confident and happy, and my husband loved the dress as well, and we had a wonderful time on Christmas. For all of you who celebrate, I hope you had a great holiday season and spent it with your loved ones. I'm sending you guys all of my love and happy wishes for the new year. I'm so excited I get to spend the next year with you and share all of my crochet projects and ideas. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I have many more videos on the way very soon. As always, thank you so much for all the support and following me on my crochet journey. I hope to see you guys all in my next video. Bye everyone!